and with Crystal Locatore, who is maybe running around too, and Sarah Gallender-Mayer. Thank you all. This is our last panel for the day. Oh, there's Crystal. Woo! This is our last panel for the day. I hope you guys had a really wonderful time. I'm going to introduce Brian Boucher, our moderator, in just a second, but wanted to thank Appraisal Bureau for sponsoring our talks at the Lodge during this weekend. There are more on the program tomorrow and Sunday, and then tonight from 6 to 8 at Hotel Downstreet in downtown North Adams, where the shuttle has been picking people up. If you've been taking that, there is a reception in one of their gallery spaces featuring the wonderful Jean Shin, who is being presented by Powerhouse Arts, our friends, as well as Fulver Ramoka and Lower Cavity. And so we hope you guys can all come. And in terms of this event, this will finish at 5 and the galleries will be closed, so we hope to see you back tomorrow. I wanted to just thank Brian Boucher, our moderator, for this event, and he will go ahead and introduce our panelists. But Brian is a journalist and art critic and came up here last year for a little test run with us, and I'm just so appreciative of your support, so thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here. Glad to contribute. I've been on Team Arrival since the start, so very glad to contribute. So I am here with 4 representatives of tremendous organizations that have given so much support to the arts. Brooke Anderson with VIA, Angela Mattox with Creative Capital, Patton Hindle with Artadia, and Charlotte Wagner of the Wagner Foundation. And I want to sort of toot their respective horns a little bit and just talk about how they support an impressively wide range of support the arts in so many ways, from grants to individual artists, to realized projects, to supporting regional focused arts publications, to supporting public art exhibitions and professional training for artists, artist residencies, museum exhibitions, and so much more. And I want to just run through like a few numbers, and hopefully I have my numbers right. I'm a words guy more than a numbers guy. But to give an idea of the scope and the depth of support that they've given and the length of time that these organizations have been at it in ascending order of foundation date. Artadia, I think, has been around for 25 years, right? 26 years, thank you. Getting my numbers right. And awarded $6 million, right, to hundreds of artists in 8 cities. Creative Capital, also around for 25 years. 25 years, okay. And given out $55 million in grants across the US, over 1,000 artists have been awarded financial support of up to $50,000, and 275,000 artists served with their educational programs and resources. The Wagner Foundation, represented by Charlotte Wagner, established in 2005, operates internationally, and has granted $22 million, and just this year initiated new fellowships to individual artists, which I'll let her talk about. And then the VIA Art Fund with Brooke, just on my left, the youngest organization, started in 2013, and has already given out $9 million to artists with grants as high as $100,000, mostly in the US, but about 20% internationally. And among these organizations, there are artists that have gone on to to be represented in shows like the Whitney Biennial and Prospect New Orleans, and gone on to win MacArthur Fellowships and Guggenheim Grants and Pulitzer Prizes. So really an incredibly august group of artists that are alums of their support. So maybe just in order away from me, each of you could talk for maybe 5 minutes about what you all do, and I would love to hear from each of you maybe about exactly how you support artists with your organization, and how maybe a little bit about what is unique about your organization in the funding landscape, and if applicable, if there's like 1 or 2 things about the culture of your organization that really made you want to work with.
Thank you, Brian. Well, I just want to acknowledge this crowd. At times like this, it feels so good to be in community with all of you. I'm seeing artists, I'm seeing patrons, I'm seeing advocates for the arts, and I'm just so grateful to be with all of you this afternoon. I want to speak first about how we support artists, and then I'll touch upon how we support our patrons, and collectors and future philanthropists. So VIA is founded on 3 pillars. We privilege artistic excellence, thought leadership, and public access. We're looking to create opportunities for many around contemporary art in places that can be accessed for all. Those 3 pillars are supporting artists between $25,000 and $100,000 grants. We give about 10 a year, sometimes 12 a year. We are international. We fund American artists working anywhere, and we fund international artists working in the US. When I'm sitting here on Route 2, I'm thinking about being bookended by 2 projects we've funded in this region. And I want to take a minute to talk about a former project that closed about 2 years ago by E.J. Hill, a Los Angeles-based artist, who I hope those of you who are from here rode his roller coaster at Mass MoCA. It was a privilege to work with Mass MoCA. We provided a $75,000 grant for that roller coaster to be constructed and then utilized by all of you. It was a dream of EJ's, who is a fan and advocate of roller coasters and fairgrounds. Another project coming up is at the Clark Art Institute, where we have funded Hugh Hayden, a New York-based artist, to create his upcoming outdoor skeletal piece called ... the End. And we provided another $75,000 grant for Hugh and the Clark Art Institute to present this work out on their grounds in the upcoming project called Groundwork, which will open next month. And my understanding, we haven't seen it yet, is that Hugh's skeletal wooden sculpture will be on the fringes of the forest, and it's kept there to decompose and change over the years, entitled The End. So we love to support artists and their big dreams. We often fund artists before the work exists. So we are going in a leap of faith to bring their wildest dreams come true, to push their practice forward. So we're looking for applications where an artist is doing something they haven't done before. Something materially, scale-wise, content-wise, and that's the space that VIA loves to occupy. We love it to be, when possible, free and open to the public, because we hope that our philanthropy is building audiences for contemporary art. We hope that the projects that we do ignite future curators and future artists through a free and open to the public opportunity. So I would say that that's kind of our criteria. The one unusual aspect of our criteria, and I should say with my colleagues that Charlotte Wagner has been a long-standing part of VIA, is that we are always looking for the needle to be pushed, and for that to happen, we require a venue. So unlike some granting organizations who fund an artist for their studio practice, we fund an artist for a site-specific project. That's one aspect of who we serve, the artists, and it's an honor to be looking at a VIA grantee. I'm sorry to tease you out of the audience, but Joy Minaya is here. She's a VIA grantee of last year for her wrapping project of the New Orleans African American Museum during Prospect 6. And it was an astounding jury, the way that I described that we're looking for ambition and bold and new and kind of pushing an artist forward. That was the largest project I think you've ever done to date, just wrapping a building. We also serve collectors, and I know there are a lot of collectors here today. We serve collectors through the model of decision-making that we have, which is perhaps the most unusual aspect of VIA. VIA thrives on the support of patrons, philanthropists, collectors, and donors. There are 75 of them currently, They're all over the country and abroad, and they contribute to our grant-making budget, and for that contribution, they actually decide on what we fund every year. So the decision-making happens in an educational setting. So if you're a collector and you want to know more about contemporary art, VIA is a great place for you, because through our philanthropy, you're learning about artists like Jory and Hugh Hayden and E.J. Hill. And you end up deciding and determining through a rigorous voting process where you meet the artists and you meet the curators and you interview them. You're making the decision about what VIA Art Fund is going to support for the year ahead. With that, I will pass it on.
That was so inspiring. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Wonderful to be here and see you all today. I just first wanted to acknowledge the founders of Rival Art Fair. It's an extraordinary endeavor, and it's really inspiring to see this convergence of creativity and collaboration in this really, really beautiful place, and it's an honor to be here and amongst this amazing panel. I'm Angela Mattox. I'm the Director of Artist Initiatives at Creative Capital. We are a funding body that supports innovative new projects across the country. We're interested in supporting artists who are experimenting with form, pushing the boundaries of idea in all disciplines. So one thing that connects us perhaps is we are absolutely unwavering in our commitment to supporting visionary visual artists, but we're actually multidisciplinary as well. So we also support performing arts, film, literature, technology, social engaged practice, and all those in-between spaces. So when you think of creative capital, one of the things that's really synonymous with our work is innovation, experimentation. Artists are really transdisciplinary often, pushing the boundaries of the in-betweens around form and idea. We have been around 25 years, and it's a really, really special moment. We're in this kind of a space of not only celebration of the 25 years, this body of work we supported over 1,000 artists in all disciplines, but we're also in this moment of looking forward in terms of what is our role, how do we continue ensuring that we're a generative force for artists to apply to us and to create new projects. So in short, if you remember us, we are a project grantor. We believe in, again, being a generative space where artists can put forward new project ideas. So we're an open application process. There's not a ton of opportunities for artists around open applications. We are a national open application process. So we run an open call every year. We do it in the spring. We just had a deadline in April. And we take the year to invite in all these extraordinary external reviewers, some curators, academics, artists, to have the really difficult task of reviewing. We usually get around 4,500 to about over 5,000 applications a year, to whittle that down to an extraordinary 50 projects a year. Those represent some of the most visionary artists working today with new project ideas that are taking us forward in terms of content and idea. A little tactically, I'll just share a little bit about what maybe is distinctive about our grant-making philosophy and our model. So we absolutely believe in getting money in the hands of artists to create projects. We give up to $50,000 per project, 50 grants a year. But in addition to the monetary support, we really believe in offering support for those artists for their practice, not just their project. So what that looks like tangibly is we offer one-on-one consultations with a series of advisors for that artist. It could be a strategic planner around their practice, thinking about career advice and where they're heading, their aspirations, their challenges. It could be setting them up with a financial planner to walk through navigating all the different income streams or debt and how to move forward with pride. Practical knowledge. We might set them up with a meeting with someone in PR or marketing. All these are some, expert topics that we want to make sure that our grantees have access to around information, tools to strengthen their work for a thriving career. We also offer connections to industry professionals. We do one-on-one meetings with curators for our grantees so that they can initiate new relationships, thinking about where their work might go and thrive. One of the other key tenets of our work is to think about bringing people together. And Brian, you asked a question of, I think, what brought us to our organizations or something that really is inspiring. I've been a long champion of creative capital well before I started 5.5 years ago. I was a former curator in another life, and I had the great honor of reviewing for the organization, and more importantly, coming to different gatherings. So one of the core tenets of creative capital is to bring people together. We invite our new cohorts, and in fact, we just had a really massive gathering a few days ago in New York City. We have an artist gathering called Carnival. I'm still a little bit bleary-eyed and dark circles under my eyeballs. We just welcomed several hundred people to celebrate our 2025 cohort of grantees in all disciplines. They were coming forward and sharing their projects that are in development. There was screening at Lincoln Center, and we did a ton of other conversations with industry professionals. And also, I think just as important, we create space for those artists to just be together, artist to artist, across disciplines. One of the things I was talking to them about a few days ago was, we're often at tables where we're in the mix around our discipline, visual artists talking to visual artists, film curators talking to film curators, and what is the potential when we can bring artists together in all disciplines to be at that same table? There's so many different thematic synergies across the table, disciplinary-wise. And it was a really inspiring couple of days, just recently. And I would say that's what's really one of the most meaningful things about my work is this long-term support for individual artists and bringing them together in person to find unexpected synergies around conversations that we seed and we don't know where they're going to go, creatively, artistically, professionally. I'll conclude by saying two things. One is that it is a really inspiring model around our artists, and you might be wondering if there's artists in the house. Okay, it's a really rigorous process, it's super competitive, is there anything for me? And we've always been dedicated to providing resources to artists across the country and globally beyond our granting program. Right now, we have an extraordinary online professional development resource that we call the Artist Lab. This is an online curriculum of professional development resources for free for individual artists. It contains best practices around, writing grants, best practices around networking, financial planning, and we're constantly developing new courses all the time, also activated by live artist labs around the content. So stay tuned for that. There's always more. It's open to everyone. Last thing I'll say is a little bit around what's on the horizon. We're really proud of our work with the awards, but with getting over 5,000 applications a year, all across the country, we really wanted to respond to that need and the urgency. We've launched what we're calling the State of the Art Prize. And this is a new prize that will fund an artist in every single state in the country with a $10,000 unrestricted prize. This is in addition to our Creative Capital Awards. This is really an acknowledgement of the extraordinary work. We want to be a positive force for experimentation in every state in the country.
I think one of the best things about being here is how much all of our work flows in and out of each other, so it's really just a pleasure to have this group together. And also, couldn't think of a better environment. I feel like this arrival itself, I was here also a year ago when Brian was here as well for one of the sort of launch events, but seeing all of these various communities from New York, Boston, San Francisco, and elsewhere gather together, and we're talking about representing funders, we're talking about curators, artists. It was really a whole picture of what the arts ecosystem is, and I think it's a really beautiful thing. So grateful that you all are here with us. I'm Patton. I'm the executive director of Artadia. As noted, we are a 26-year-old organization. We were founded in 1999 in direct response to the National Endowment for the Arts cutting funding to artists. And what happened was a group of arts patrons and philanthropists gathered together, deeply concerned about how artists would have the freedom and the vitality and the space to think, just to simply make their work. And so they pooled what limited funds they had in that moment and started making merit-based awards. Similar to Creative Capital, we are a fully open call process, and that's intentional. So while I say we started in the Bay Area, I should also note that we then slowly but surely expanded into 7 core cities, and then there's 1 roving city with the 21C Museum. Notable about those 7 cities is the last 2 cities that were added were New York and LA. So for us, that means that we know great work is being made everywhere in this country, and it doesn't have to be in one of these art capitals on either side of the United States. Our process is one, as I said, is open call, and it happens annually, and each month there's essentially another cycle for a city. And our jury process is actually with curators in the field. So there's always someone who's local to that city who can give context to what an artist might be making that is intentional to their specific community. And then beyond that, there are 2 curators who are coming from elsewhere in the country. So the artist is also having their work seen by people notable in the field. I like to say that because we've actually supported more curators and arts workers than we have artists. And I think that that's incredibly important when we think about the ecosystem of the world that we're in. And I think what also identifies us as truly different is that our funding is unrestricted. So we're not asking you to propose a project. We're saying, show us your work. It's a simple, easy application. There is no fee. But the idea is for us to help discover new talent. And to that end, it's funny, you mentioned E.J. Hill. He was a grantee for us. Jory was a grantee of ours as well. I think what Artadia sort of stands out as is kind of identifying talent before the rest of the field has. And that's why our supporters come in the vein of also curators as well. So we know that our artist registry is literally physically printed out every 2 years for the Whitney Biennial. It is a research tool for the curators. But we know that that extends then and helps the artists beyond. And then even if somebody is not selected, let's say for it to be a finalist or an awardee in one of our cities, that local curator, one of my favorite recent stories, Owen Duffy, who's in Houston, he was our local curator for our Houston cycle last year. He discovered artists in Houston that he didn't know. So maybe they weren't the finalists, but then he conducted studio visits on his own time with those artists. So it goes beyond just simply receiving the award. And if someone is a finalist, we also work diligently with them to help them reapply next year if they didn't receive the award in the previous year. And oftentimes they do receive that award. But for me, I also think like one of the things that brought me to the organization, which is sort of a full circle moment, I started my career in Boston at a gallery. For those who know Abby Goodman, she had a gallery that was called the Judy Rotenberg Gallery. And I was her gallery manager. And one of the first events I worked was a cultivation event to bring together folks who were excited about what Artadia could do in that city. And throughout my career being in galleries, working at Kickstarter, I continued to collaborate with artists who had come out of Artadia. And they all speak to how impactful it was, not the money, but the recognition, for them to have that opportunity to be known for their work. And we continue to support them throughout their careers with lifetime professional development as well. So yes.
Okay, so Wagner Foundation, I think you'll hear something a little bit different from me. We are a foundation that is very dedicated to building healthier communities. We are funding in healthcare and health. We are funding in economic mobility areas and in the transformative power of the arts. And I think the philosophy really for me around arts funding and funding artists is one where I believe that art and artists are absolutely essential to our health, to the health of us individually, as folks, and absolutely fundamentally important to the health of the community. And we need to recognize that, I believe, in our society. We need to support artists and art in our communities, and ultimately that will make us healthier, the arts also contributes tremendously to the economic vitality of a community. So that's the frame that I see the world through, and kind of the way that the foundation is operating. For us, I think from the arts funding side of things, it means funding in many different areas within the arts ecosystem, so that there is a place for artists to build their career, grow their career, kind of across an ecosystem. It will mean working with these folks. I work pretty much with everybody here and funded the projects that they're working on. It will mean funding publications. It will mean funding work for curators. We just had an engagement curation conference in Philadelphia where we brought folks together from different institutions that are really working in the public engagement part of the art world, funding institutions, funding artists directly. as well. We recently started a new Wagner Artist Fellowship that will fund 3 artists each year in the Boston area, mid-career artists who are, we're trying to give them the ability, artists in Boston, to have a place to stay and thrive, and be a part of that community to support artists. So, really we're looking very holistically and trying to find areas to support the arts ecosystem across the board. And I think we're funding nationally, and we we'll do that in several different places, but we are very engaged in New England and in Boston. And so we're really trying to create that environment for artists to thrive. So I'll leave it there.
So, Patton, you mentioned a previous round of cuts to the NEA having inspired your organization, and I have been sort of thinking that we could have called this panel the now more than ever panel, sort of a cliche of recent years. But I wonder if your organizations were, over the recent years, thinking about the possibility of, or months about the possibility of another Trump presidency and the possibility of the NEA and the NEH, which laid off 60% of their staff, I read this morning. And did you think ahead to ways that you could respond to that, or are you thinking now about ways that you can try to step up and meet the gap? I mean, organizations like Warhol and Mellon have given out like emergency grants that are explicitly geared to replace some of those lost monies that have been stolen by the Trump administration.
The way I see it, and love to be in dialogue with the 3 of you about this, is that the arts in the United States have always been underfunded, and artists have always been in need. And so it takes all of us to try and bring some security to the sector by supporting our artists in the myriad and specific ways that we each do. So for us at VIA, this is one reason why we started 13 years ago and continuing to fund artists in the coming years and future, regardless of what's happening at the federal level. It's a constant need, and there's always going to be, I think, a desire for more.
I'm sorry, you go ahead, Charlotte.
I was just going to say, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, if the money that the government used to support artists and arts and culture in our country is very, very important, but it actually accounts for 2.5% of all of the money that is needed to fund art and culture in the United States. So absolutely, I think it provides recognition. It gives us, it's very vitally important. But for a very long time, I think we've had to rely on other types of funding, other actors in the landscape to be able to support our arts and culture sector.
Definitely agree, and I would say that there was this old adage that like $1 of federal funding unlocked, I think it was $16 of private capital. And this is an old statistic; it's probably like almost 10 years old at this point. But I kind of wonder now, with what's happening, if that is even the validation that people need to support the arts anymore. I think that us being here speaking about our work, the people that we work with continuing to essentially evangelize for what it is that we do and the importance of arts and culture in our communities, and doing so on a very local level like Charlotte is in Boston, and like how Artadia tries to in each of our 7 cities build those communities to really show what it is of a scaffold of support that an artist can have, is almost more important. And I think that that's really where, because there's no trust, or I don't know everybody's opinions, but there's less and less trust, let's say, in the federal government at this point in time, that statistic may not be relevant anymore. And so we've always had to be nimble and figure these things out. I don't think that I anticipated that we would be in this situation, that we would have this presidency, but you also never know which way things are going to go, and it doesn't change my dedication to the work that we're doing. So.
And I think one of the ways we all come up with solutions is partnerships. I'm thinking of the Wagner Foundation and Via Art Fund, where we started more than 5 years ago an incubator grant program that funded $1 million to 25 organizations around the country with 2-year grants that were for general operating support. Always a welcome award for organizations and artists alike. But the way that we rally around the sector and the need for contemporary artists is really one of the solutions, right? And I looked to just recently the fires in Los Angeles and how so many organizations and funders got on board and contributed to artists who had suffered in the fires. That to me is a solution that I look to more than perhaps what's happening in Washington, D.C.
And it's like artist relief during the pandemic, which all of us are really part of, which we're making quick emergency grants to artists. And it's funny, but it does fall back on the practitioners in the field to come up with these solutions. And artists, because artists also should always have a seat at a table in making those decisions. They know what's best for them and they know what they need the most, and it's our job to listen and be responsive to that.
I think too, I would add in terms of our partnership in collaborating with organizations that have different skill sets or operate in different registers in a community, let's say, I think really adds something and helps to, if we were to think about our partnership with VIA, we were really thinking about the community, the parts we really know well are kind of the ecosystem of a community, what is needed in the community as we've seen through supporting healthcare institutions and community clinics and food programs and all the other kinds of programs that we're supporting. We kind of know that really well, and VIA really knew the arts piece really well, and so collectively we were able to identify 25 organizations around the country that were really meeting the moment in their individual communities. So those kinds of unique partnerships where where we're partnering together, each offering some difference, I think, in the way that we look at it. That synergy, I think, is really important and different.
I'm just going to add to that, saying I think what's imperative is that artists really understand who to go to when, for what. And thank God there's the Warhols that can come in that way, or emergency funding. I want to ensure that artists know when to come to Creative Capital for. We often round up resources around that artist relief and pull that together and galvanize where to come for resources, but we're not the emergency funder. We are, we fund a certain thing. So I think, again, what's important for me is that artists understand that the clarity around the purpose and identity of a funding body, and for us to be consistent and clear and to be stable. And that's what we're really focused on, certainly at Creative Capital, is stability. So we're here tomorrow to support an artist.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, I'm fascinated also by the way that your approach to kind of ecosystem funding, and I think it's so easy for people to feel like economic mobility and health are things that are more urgent needs, and so to put arts on a level with those, with your organization does, is something I find really fascinating.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm always thinking about is one of the biggest funding gaps for the arts is that the arts are not considered essential. And I don't believe that. I mean, I really believe that art is essential to being human. The arts reflect our humanity, and the arts give us a chance to express our humanity. And without the arts, we are not humans. We're very different, right? So I put it on the same level. I think that, absolutely, to be healthy, to have a healthy community, we need to support our artists, and we need to support creativity and the ability for artists to reflect back to us what we need to know and think about. And we need to support our institutions so that they, so there is a path and a progress. So it's all these different aspects of the artistic ecosystem that are really important so that artists have a pathway and there are opportunities for artists in different levels.
I also wonder about how you think about the demographics of the artists that you support, supporting artists of color, supporting women artists, and how you feel like, how are you doing in terms of your stats on that? Is that something that you feel like you want to improve?
at Via Art Fund, we recently hired Charlotte Burns and Julia Halpern, I think probably, hopefully known to many of you in the room, important journalists who have been doing a lot of data-driven research on the art world and the state of the art worlds. And Charlotte and Julia took a deep dive into our grant making, and we learned through their data of our work that VIA had been supporting at 49% of our funding mid-career Black female artists. And while our mission is to support great artists doing important work, turns out that the majority of our funds were going to Black female mid-career artists. So we're pretty excited by that statistic.
I mean, I'll just briefly say, our open call is open to everyone. All backgrounds, everyone. And that's more important than ever right now. We fund, again, through an external review process. Our grantees are over 70% BIPOC, all disciplines. But I really just want to emphasize we are open to everyone to apply.
I think part of actually what drew me to working at Artadia and to taking over the leadership position was actually the incredible diversity of the artists that the organization has supported throughout its history. And that's really because we're reliant upon our jurors to make those decisions for us. Yes, we're open call in the same way, so it's going to be truly open to anybody. But I mean, Stephanie Sujeko was a 1999 awardee. The Astor Gates, I think, was 06 in Chicago or 05. Nick Cave was somewhere in that same timeline too. And actually, if you're gonna go to Mass Mocha later, Vincent Valdez, also his solo show, he was 2019 in Houston. And if you missed his New York Times write-up the other week, he was called a Chicano Hieronymus Bosch. It's a really exceptional show. I saw it in Houston, so I can't wait to see it here. But I think for me, it was always recognizing that great work was being made everywhere in the country by every type of person. And so our demography has always been incredibly diverse within the organization, and that, I should say, will never change.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have been a social justice organization from our founding and worked all over the world and are very cognizant of trying to be supportive of all groups and all people. And but we also have, spent time looking at historically undervalued populations and historically marginalized populations, and have, I think, put more effort into those communities, those projects, and trying to increase scholarship around artists that maybe would fall into that category. So yes, I think we would be very proud of our record, and I do think it's. I know that where we are politically right now. That DEI is a difficult place to be, but I would say that I honestly believe that if folks have been undervalued in our society, we should be concentrating on those who have been undervalued. It's just something that it's part of our humanity and part of something that I think that we need to put at the forefront of our mind. So, we're going to continue to do that.
Okay, well, we're at the 40-minute mark. Any other questions among you all for each other, or should we, obviously incredible interest in this subject in the arrival crowd. Should we go over to some questions? Sure. All right. Who's the brave person with the first question? Yes.
Thank you for such thoughtful work that you're doing. I'm curious in terms of making sure that you're reaching a diverse group, and I'm just curious about any specific outreach you do to make sure that you are reaching people that are maybe not networked in, tuned in, or aware of these kinds of opportunities.
Sure, I can take a shot at it first. We rely deeply on partners in each of our 7 cities to help make sure that our open call is being spread, because admittedly we are a staff of 5 people based in Brooklyn. So Brian didn't know we were 5 people. That's what I'm guessing that drop was.
I see my job dropping. Yeah.
But no, we rely very heavily on having partnerships in each of our cities, and that can be from other cultural institutions, community-based organizations. It can be from partnerships with funders like Wagner. I mean, they also help us plan public programs that we do. So not just that all of our programs is specific to our awardees, it extends out to the general population, because we want to make sure that even if you haven't been a finalist yet or received an award, that you are aware that we're there and that we are open to you, and maybe meeting and being in community with other people that you might not have known will help progress your own career towards maybe being at the next step of receiving one of our awards.
I mentioned a moment ago this 10-year survey that Charlotte Burns and Julia Halpern worked on for VIA. And while we found out that we were funding 49% male artists, 51% female artists, 49% African-American mid-career women artists, we found that our percentage around Latinx artists was much smaller than the national percentage. So what we did is we're a staff of 4. So our tiny team decided that we would look for allies who could perhaps get the word out successfully to the Latinx community. And we found USLAF, which is based at Tufts, so here in Massachusetts, an incredible organization that is an information outlet for Latinx artists. And we did a bilingual presentation about VIA so that everyone would know about us, would have opportunity to apply to us, because we too are an open call. And it looks like we're going to do that as well with the Native communities in 2025 in the fall, in another relationship that we're currently developing. We don't have much of a marketing budget, interestingly, so that doesn't seem, that sort of standard idea doesn't seem to right now work for us. So we're doing what we do really well, which is build relationships, and that's what we're going to hopefully in the next 5 years help us change our demographic study for the next round.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think there's something really there around. It's really interesting to think about marketing as a funder, because it doesn't always work, like the traditional channels around getting the word out. And I appreciate what you're saying in that it often has to do with the information coming from a trusted source. We often rely a lot on our awardees to champion and recommend other artists in their community to us. And sometimes we hear from them personally saying it really took that artist sitting down with that other artist that they thought should apply, really walking them through the application, being a reader before that applicant was submitted so that there was support around it, and really having that sense of, no, you can do it. Yes, and have that sense of confidence around it. So I will say it's a very different way of, I would say, I'm thinking about outreach and encouragement from, of course, the broad channels, but often it's that so when we send a message to our awardees and past viewers and curators and partners in all parts of the country, yes, there's the spread the word, but here's how to nominate artists. We will then reach out to them and get them to hopefully apply, but we often have another clause in there that says, it's most successful if you actually really talk to that artist and encourage them yourself and follow up with them and say, did you apply? Because even with that encouragement, we find that artists sometimes still don't apply. So it's something we're always thinking about, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
I was going to say one other additive, because we do the same. In fact, Jory, did you apply because Simon Benjamin told you to apply? Did you tell me that?
I don't remember.
Someone told me that Simon. Yeah, so I was like, someone. We know we rely deeply on our existing awardees also to share that out. But I'd say the other really key thing is that we make our applications simple. We do not want that to be burdensome for anybody. You should not be doing unpaid labor in that way. So it needs to be simple and it needs to be easy for an artist to get into.
Other questions? Yeah.
I guess I might have to talk this through a minute, but I have 2 separate questions. One is about, within the language of DEI, is there any consideration for a real economic diversity alongside identity diversity, or are you able to even consider that in the scope of that kind of diversity? And then the other is about the investments of these funds. Is there any mandate or corollary to what the funds are invested in terms of ESG or triple bottom lines, or is that considered wholly distinct from the sort of mission of the grant?
We don't collect the economic data, I'll say, of people when they're applying, because that feels like a hard step to start asking somebody that. But in the award-making process, the jurors are both to consider the merit of an artist's work, but whether this would be a pivotal moment in their practice. And so, pivotal moment in the practice, kind of confusing, get it, we hear that. We're working on how to better articulate that as an organization. But to me, that could be an artist who has been overlooked for a period of time and hasn't had a lot of resources given towards their work. Or it could be an artist who had an incredibly successful career and kind of dipped out for several years. In fact, a recent awardee of ours did do that. They did a lot of mutual aid work on their own time during COVID and sacrificed their own practice for that, and then came and just received an award from us. So we really try to rely on our jurors to help us navigate those things, and those are through studio visits and conversations with the artists. In terms of investing funds, do you mean of our own resources as an organization?
I mean
Like of an endowment?
the endowment.
We don't have an endowment.
Yeah, we don't have an endowment either.
Likewise, I think we're not, we're using juries as well, and we're not asking for the economic piece of that either, but again, like a pivotal moment, so very similar in scope. We do have an endowment, and you know that's the mechanism that a private foundation operates on, is that. We have not taken the step of being very dictating an ESG kind of a fund management thing. We are looking at really more of an impact investing framework where we might invest part of those proceeds into an agricultural program or something that is, building a health system somewhere else in the world. So it's not really been in the ESG kind of framework, but more in the idea of being able to invest those funds elsewhere.
And if I could just add one thing to your question. You just heard that 3 great grant funders to artists don't have endowments. And so something that maybe isn't always in top of mind is that all 3 of us also are fundraising. We have development teams. We raise the money that we then cycle through to artists and to projects. So we're fundraising as much as anything, all the time.
Yeah, so I've worked in arts education for many years, and I feel like there's always these silos of arts interests within the ecosystem, one being arts education, one being direct support for artists, which you all are doing. And in the conversation that you're talking about, the art ecosystem, I'm curious of how much conversation and maybe influence, I'm not sure that's the right word, but how much conversation and influence is happening between the education side and the direct support for artists, because I feel like there's so many young people that have little to no access on the grand scale to arts education, and they peel off that pathway before they get to even be able to apply. And I see that constantly, the people who have the idea of even considering yourself an artist, because I think it is part of our humanity, that we are all artists, but that identity has been stripped of them. And so I'm curious how much y'all talk about, influence those sectors that are just outside of what you do.
I guess I'll take that one. We think about it a lot, and I can say we are often funding the part of an institution that is the part that's what you wouldn't typically support. So for instance, I would say at the ICA, the Contemporary Art Museum in Boston, we have been funding the teen program there, which, for many, many years, directly looking at how can we create programs there that can find the young people, that can invest in the young people. It's been a remarkable program. They've been, the ICA has been recognized, often for its tremendous program. But that idea of finding the place in an institution or in any kind of an organization that's just on the outside of what you would expect is actually where I find there's something magical can happen. I'll give you another example. We funded Papan Osario's artwork through Jefferson University Medical School. And so we're funding an artist project, but through a medical school that's going to educate, that's going to be open to the public and upon realize this amazing project, but is also going to be available to medical school students and doctors and part of the health system to try to, again, be at that special place in between space, if you will. So I think those are really exciting kinds of spaces for us, and looking at that kind of an ecosystem approach and trying to find those spaces in between.
In our application process, education, access, and public programming is part of the criteria that our decision makers utilize when they're determining what we fund and what we don't fund.
Yeah, my question is probably more technical. How the foundation work with artists? Like artists apply the fund, and if they are lucky enough to got the funding, but what happened? The concept, like life, everything can change, evolve. If the original concept when you apply change, shift, or have some big challenge, how the foundation work with the artists? Are you going to come back to evaluate, or just give them money and then that's it? Yeah.
I'll get us started in that area. We know that the creative process is going to take someone from A to Z when we are evaluating a project. And so we have many examples in our 200 or so grant awards over the last 13 years where a project has gone from A to Z, from the time that an award was given to the implementation of a project. And we are patient and respectful of that process. I would say what we care about most is a transparent line of communication so that we're aware of any of these adaptations, which are a natural part of the process.
That rings true. I think at Creative Capital, any funder that's supporting new work, new projects, that's a part of it. And I think you really need to understand the organic nature of the creative process and the idea. These are ideas that then shift once the award is given. In the landscape of imagination, things shift. In the landscape of a studio, things start shifting. In collaboration, things start shifting. So yeah, I'm really proud of Creative Capital. We want to ensure that the essence of the idea, the essence of an inquiry has, retains. But often the projects really shift in terms of formal investigation and how it happens. So we're excited by artistic growth as somebody is tackling an ambitious, bold new idea in that way. Change is natural and part of it, so there's nothing punitive around that. And then sometimes projects pause and shift, and we're really agreeable to that. So I think that's the only way to support experimental, innovative, contemporary practice.
Artadia is not a project-based funder, so we give unrestricted money, meaning that if you were to receive the award, you could pay your studio rent with it, you could pay off credit card debt, we really don't care. The point is, however you need to use the money, we trust that you know how to use the money. And I think that's part of another reason that I really love the organization and came to it, was that it really did put the trust back in the artist, and it was really the beginning in some ways of trust-based philanthropy.
Yeah, I think I would echo what folks are saying. I mean, things often morph and change over time. We fund some of all of these kinds of projects and are very familiar with things changing over time and having to adapt. And honestly, again, when we're funding artists, the Artist Fellowship, that's unrestricted, and so that can be used for anything. But we take an approach. It is a very similar approach to trust-based philanthropy, but something that we call accompaniment philanthropy. And so, we try to make ourselves available and sort of walk next to a grantee, to be there to help try to realize, to try to overcome challenges, to try to use our experience and what we've seen to possibly help mitigate some of those, challenges or changes. So it's an important part of our process, is this idea of accompanying.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. Hi, I am an artist, and I also have a company that does development consulting with cultural nonprofits. So a lot of my clients are residency programs, nonprofit art spaces that support artists directly. And what I'm hearing from them, especially in the last 5 years, is that artists are experiencing a crisis in terms of housing and workspace. And I wonder if that's also been reflected back to you and what organizations like yours can do about it, what innovative solutions you've seen that work.
I mean, I can chime in from, I guess, like Artadia's perspective and sort of more broadly. I mean, one of the things that I've been inspired seeing happening in the field and something that I'm interested in us exploring are community loan programs. So out to our existing awardee pool. I serve on the board of an organization called the Laundromat Project in New York, and we have a community loan fund. And they're not high amounts of money, but there's like zero interest, and you can have it for a year or 2 years and like slowly pay it back over time. And that idea is really just to provide someone capital when they need it. At Artadia, when I joined the organization, I wanted us to be thoughtful about the work that we had done in the past and how we carry that forward. So I mentioned Artist Relief, which was a big monumental effort amongst a large group of arts organizations during COVID to provide emergency funding to artists across the country. So we developed a program called the Sustaining Fund, which are one-time emergency microgrants to our awardees. We actually always intended to launch it in the beginning of 2025. We took most of last year to fundraise and build the pool of funds for it. Unbeknownst to us, but I guess this is the world, there were wildfires in Los Angeles. So the organization, we were one of the founding contributors to the Getty Fund as well, so we used some of our own resources to also contribute to the Getty Fund, because that's a city we serve. And then we opened our emergency microgrant program only to artists in Los Angeles first for 2 weeks, so that they had enough time to apply and they got first dibs on the pool of funds we have. Then we opened it to the rest of our awardee pool, and the money was gone in 6 minutes. And we have a wait list of about 50 artists on it right now. So there is a lot of need. I call it the sea of need. But because of the precarity of all the things that you mentioned, and I know Charlotte has and her foundation have actually helped us produce public programs in Boston to talk about artist spaces. Where are there locations for artists to actually make work and be together? I know, Allison, you have a studio practice that you've tried to figure out how you can bring more community into it so that everybody can have the same set of tools that you have to make your work. So it is, you're speaking to a very clear problem that I know foundations like Wagner are definitely addressing.
Yeah, I think, we've tried to look at all the different aspects, and so funding studio space, artists, studio space would be something that we could do directly, and we could do it quickly, because it's obviously they exist. The housing piece is a real challenge. We are right now in the process of looking at land trusts, community land trusts, and other forms of ownership, and kind of looking at these artist-run spaces and models that artists are undertaking kind of around the country, and that's a new body of work that we're looking to fund in the coming years. So it is a problem that we hear about, that we certainly understand, and short of being a real estate developer, trying to find those other models that are out there that where we could contribute to solving the problem or helping to.
If we can be very quick about it, it's 1 minute to 5, so quick question? Or
I was just curious, you funded a lot of artists, all four of you, over the years. And two related questions. Do you track them all over time? And if you do, what percentage of them remain artists in the public domain? I know they probably remained in the private domain for their lives. So I'm just curious if there's any, by and large, stats around that.
Well, we're the youngest organization here, so we do have a strong sense of the project's lifeline and lifetime. But many of our projects, Steve, are temporal. So they're from the get-go, they're temporary, they're not meant to be permanent. We do have one exciting aspect of VIA. When we were in our third year after being founded in 2013, we recognized that we were producing new work. And so we came up with a collaboration with the artists we fund. And at our biggest grant making level, which is $100,000, we work with the artist and we donate the artwork to a museum in the States. And we've done that 50 times. So VIA's legacy will be lifelong in that we are contributors to museum collections around the country.
Quick answers?
Quick, I'll just say, this sounds kind of tactical, but my team, we have Google alerts on every single Creative Capital awardee. thousands. It's kind of thankless work, but I get thousands of Google alerts, and so when the name pops up, we track it, and then we actually track it all in the effort to promote what artists are doing. So through our social media channels, we want to acknowledge when one of our Creative Capital awardees receives a big prize, or has a show up, or has something, and we promote it. So they can always request it, but we find that sometimes artists don't, serve on their behalf and request promotion, so we do it for them. So that data, I would say, is with our 1,000 awardees, a lot of them are still doing extraordinary things in the world, and we're doing our best to keep tabs on them.
We like Google Alerts too. I'd say the other thing is that we try to annually survey our artists to understand where they're at in their careers and what they're working on. And also, I would say in tandem with that, what they feel the most pressing needs are for them in their careers now, so that we can make sure that our